Ladies and gentlemen, today, you and I, and every single Canadian, live in a Canada that is different from what it was on May 31st, 2022. This is because on June 1st of last year, Bill 96 came into staggered effect, and its implementation is ongoing. Bill 96 is a misnomer. It's really a revolutionary change to the Charter of the French language. The new amended Charter of the French language completely reorders the framework of human rights, meaning your rights. The purpose is stated in the new charter. That is to render the French language the language of work, play, public discourse, and every other thing other than private conversations. English and other languages are relegated to the sphere of the private. And to do this, new charter basically says your human rights, your individual liberties that you've often taken for granted, they still exist, but they're subordinated. They take second place to the collective right of the majority of Francophones of Quebec to their language, culture, and identity, to the right of the French language, which is superior to any other human right. The new charter amends the Canadian Constitution unilaterally. The Canadian Constitution is the supreme law of Canada. In it, today, it says at new section 90.Q1, Quebec is a nation, I quote. At section 90Q.2, French is the official language of the Quebec nation. It is also the common language of Quebec. That's not some Quebec law. That's the Canadian Constitution. And what that means for the rest of our Constitution and for the Charter of Rights, regardless of the notwithstanding clause, is not clear. Are you and I part of the nation? Nation is one thing in English. In French, as many of you may know, the word nation has an ethnocentric meaning. Are we part of that ethnicity? There's no answer currently. The notwithstanding clause meant to set aside the Charter of Rights in the Constitution has been invoked. So, in principle, we should not be able to even assert our individual liberties. Every law in Quebec, even laws about beekeeping, those of you who are into beekeeping and honey's pretty good, by the way, have to be interpreted as supporting the promotion of the French language. You know about CEGEPs, you also heard about that. Maybe you heard that the Office Québécois de la langue française can unilaterally enter your business and search and seize anything that offends the Charter of the French language without a warrant. But did you know that June 1st, only about 3-4 months away, on that day, June 1st of this year, 2023, no one on this webinar, no one at all, in fact, will be able to speak to the Quebec government and its agencies in the English language for business purposes. Whether you're a sole business, a mom and pop, 1,000 employees, they will not talk to you and they will not listen to you and they will not write to you and they will not receive your letters in any language other than French. And if your colleague, let's say, for example, Revenue Quebec, not about business, but about your personal income tax return. And you say, hello, I have a question about my personal income tax return. And the agent on the other end will say to you in English, thank you for calling. Thank you. But before I can continue speaking to you in English, you need to prove to me that you are an historic Anglophone, that you went to elementary or high school, or primary or secondary school, as it's called now, in English in Canada. And if you can't prove it, then the agent on the other line will say, I can't speak to you, and you cannot speak to me, and I will not listen to you in the English language. Sorry. That's just about how egregious it is. I've given a number of talks about what's in Bill 96. They take about 90 minutes, and I cannot do that now. But this is a flavor of what's coming down the road. So you say, why this litigation? Aren't there other lawsuits? And there are, except they deal with about 15 to 20% of Bill 96 and not the most significant elements. They deal with like corporations being able to use English in written proceedings in courts, or whether or not judges to the Quebec Court of Quebec, can be bilingual, and this sort of thing. That's not what affects us every day in the street in Quebec. This is different. Quebec has said through the new chart of the French language, you may all be Canadians, but just, as they say in French, à deux vitesses, two-speed Canadians. One is those who use the French language and those who insist on using another language. We will be asserting our rights as Canadians, that these rights are not suppressed by the charter, by the notwithstanding clause. The notwithstanding clause cannot be used to nullify human rights. That there are certain basic propositions of rights in this country that go beyond constitutions. There is Magna Carta. You may say Magna Carta, that's from 13 something or other. Wasn't that something that King John, remember King John, who sort of succeeded King Arthur, sorry, not King Arthur, Richard the Lionhearted. But Magna Carta is very much still alive and part of our constitutional law and history. If we do nothing, there will be nothing. I had the privilege of being a speaker at a conference this past Friday at the University of Windsor in Windsor, Ontario, speaking a bit about the Charter of the French language. And I discovered something that I never realized. Nobody understood what was Bill 96. In fact, most people never heard of Bill 96. Canadians are sleepwalking into a crisis of whether or not there exists certain basic pan-Canadian values that will be enforced, or whether or not our rights are contingent on regional issues. Your support is needed for this litigation. Your participation is needed. Money is needed. And we're not looking for a fortune of money. We need to start and start soon. Otherwise, our rights, your rights, this country's rights will simply fade away for want of interest and through apathy. I'm fluently bilingual. I speak French much week in my law practice and in court. But I don't want to be denied the right to speak to the Quebec government in English. I don't want to be denied the right to say that I am a full participant from a rights point of view. I don't want to be put in position that my community, our community, a minority community is subordinated to the majority, because it's majority that has the collective right. It's standing our framework of freedoms on its head. Rights are meant to protect the minority. Majority rarely has a problem because they're in the majority. And yet that's exactly what the new charter of the French language does. I look forward to your questions and answering them at any time. It's now time to lock arms and move forward in the courts of law. Thank you.